I always thought that traveling was just a change of scenery. New streets, smells, faces. But that morning in the old town in southern Turkey changed me forever. I was standing in front of an ancient temple, majestic and silent, like a monument to time. The stone slabs underfoot felt cold, but steeped in history, as if each crack told a different secret. The sun barely rose above the horizon, its light softly touching the windows of the temples, making them look like burnt gold. The air was thick with the smell of tar and dust, and I felt small, like a grain of sand in the vast desert of time. Suddenly the ground shook. At first, it's barely noticeable, like a soft sigh, elusive and a harbinger of trouble. But in an instant, the tremor grew to a mighty growl, and a roar filled the entire area. Stones began to fall from the arches, and the air was filled with the sounds of crashing. I saw people running in all directions, shouting and trying to find shelter. I didn't know why, but at that moment I felt that it wasn't just the temple that was collapsing, but the fabric of reality itself. The world around me became shaky. And then, as everything descended into chaos, I fell as if into a crack not only in the earth, but in time itself. I found myself in a place where there was no light, no darkness, no sounds, no thoughts. There was a void, deep and vast, but not frightening. It was as if I had emerged from the realm of life and death. And then he appeared before me. Not a figure, but a glow that was both familiar and alien. A face filled with endless love and sadness, like the whole universe at one glance. He didn't say anything. His presence was the word. And at that moment, I realized that this was not just an accident. This is the message. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of the old city. Instead, there was a strange, silent void, as if I were inside a vast outer space where time and space had ceased to exist. The darkness here wasn't black, but rather transparent, as if I was looking through something invisible, thin and shaky. But at the same time, I felt a gentle, warm glow. It didn't come from any source outside, but from within myself, as if my heart had suddenly become a small star. I raised my hand. It seemed ephemeral, as if made of light and mist. There was no air, but I could feel every cell in my body pulsing with living energy. And then I saw him, not just an image, but a presence that filled the void around me. His eyes were like oceans deep and boundless, reflecting not only all the love in the world, but also a bottomless sadness. He didn't speak in words. Instead, a voice filled my mind, clear and soft, like the first breath after a long silence. "Roman," I thought I heard. "You have passed through the crack, through the rift that opened the way to the heart of being. This is not an accident." I felt the light envelop me, and with it a warmth and peace that I had never experienced before. This light penetrated to the very depths of the soul, driving out fear and doubt. "What you see is not the end, but the beginning," the voice continued. "You are on the threshold of a choice, between what was and what can be. The land you love will soon pass a test that will accelerate time and destiny. What awaits you is a challenge and an opportunity." I tried to ask, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead of a question, I felt a strange sense of unease, as if an ancient beast of fear had been awakened inside me. "Fear is only a shadow," he replied, "and the shadows disappear when the light is stronger. But to see the light, you need to stop being afraid of the dark." I realized that this voice wasn't just a warning. It invites you to step into the unknown with an open heart. Images began to float around me, cities engulfed in fire and water, people's faces filled with despair and hope, old people and children, warriors and peacemakers, all like pieces of a huge mosaic that consists of pain and salvation. "All that is destroyed will be only that which no longer serves life," said the voice. "And only those who accept the light within themselves can be the beginning of a new world." I felt that I was being held by an invisible force, not a weight, but a responsibility. Responsibility for every decision, for every word I say, for every action. And when I opened my eyes, I could already hear the rumble of an approaching earthquake. But there was a different vibration in my soul, a vibration of hope and awakening. The ground beneath his feet began to shake again, harder this time, more insistently. I stood on the stone pavement of an ancient city, where thousands of years ago people walked, their destinies intertwined with history, and now it seemed that the planet itself was shrinking in anticipation of what was to come. The noise and roar grew louder, and it was as if the deep corridors of the earth were roaring beneath me, mighty and ancient as the memory of time itself. The wind picked up dust and dry leaves, and they swirled in a chaotic dance, as if responding to an alarm call. The people around them froze, eyes wide, faces full of horror and incomprehension. At that moment, I felt like I was both an observer and a participant. It was as if the world around me was breaking into 1,000 pieces, and I had to figure out what to become. Suddenly, the ground shifted abruptly, I lost my balance, and once again plunged into the same shaky void where time did not exist. There, in the ever-after, I saw an image neither earthly nor human. It was a crack of light that tore through the darkness like a wound on the skin of the world. There was a sound coming out of this crack, not audible to the ears, but clearly felt in the heart. It was both a whisper and a roar, a voice that spoke of all that was and would be. "This is the pulse of the earth," whispered a voice that now sounded stronger and closer inside me. "She is suffering, but she will not die. She calls for an awakening, not just for you, but for anyone else who can still hear her voice." I looked at the light, and it beckoned to me like a lighthouse in a storm. But this light wasn't a comfort, it was a challenge. It is a challenge to face your own darkness, recognize it, and find the strength to move on. I remembered what Jesus had said about fear, that it was only a shadow that could be dispelled by light. And now I understood that the earth was also experiencing fear, its ancient pain. Along with this realization, a sense of responsibility grew in me, not just to survive, but to be a part of what would come after the destruction. Time began to flow again, slowly and uncertainly. I opened my eyes to find the place already in chaos. People screamed and sought shelter, and the buildings around them cracked and collapsed. But there was a different kind of music in my heart, a pulse of hope, a call to awaken and change. Thousands of faces flashed around me, and among them I noticed a little girl who looked at me with eyes full of wonder and trust. It was like a symbol of a new life, unbroken and bright. I realized that my path was not just that of a survivor, but that of a keeper of light in this broken world. After another push, I emerged from the ruins of the old quarter and found myself among the rubble littered with dust and charred planks. There was a deafening silence, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. In the distance, I could hear muffled crying coming from the girl I'd met at the moment of the rift pulse. She sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, looking at me with eyes that were a mixture of horror and hope. I walked over, trying to find words of comfort, but the words seemed empty. Instead, I just sat down next to her and let the silence speak for me. At this moment, the world around them seemed fragile and shaky, like a thin glass that was about to shatter. But I felt that there was something inside me that couldn't be destroyed. This light that Jesus lit in my heart did not fade, despite the fear and destruction. Suddenly, the void inside me was filled with a new voice, not human, but as ancient as the planet itself. This voice came from the very depths of the earth, like the echo of forgotten eras, and spoke not with words, but with the vibration of the soul. "Listen," he seemed to say. "New things are born in the ruins. Each chip is a piece of memory that cannot be lost. Fear is only a shadow, but there is always light behind it. Listen to the voice of the earth, and you will hear more than the voice of destruction." The girl looked at me and asked quietly, "Can you hear it too?" I nodded, knowing that her questions were the questions of all mankind. Questions that few people are willing to answer. At that moment, I realized that our survival is not just a struggle with nature. This is an internal battle for meaning, for the light in yourself and around you. Jesus opened my eyes to what lies ahead, trials that will destroy not only the cities, but also the illusions in which we lived. I remembered him saying that the future is a choice, a reflection of our souls. And that it is in this choice that the power to revive the world is invested. Looking at the girl, I realized that this was not just a random moment. This is the beginning of a new path that we all have to go through together. After the earthquake, the city lay in ruins like a forgotten page of an ancient book, burned and torn, but still preserving its history. I walked through narrow streets littered with broken bricks, ash, and broken glass. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burnt wood that clung to my throat and made me cough. The world around them seemed frozen in time. People were leaving their homes, dragging the injured from the rubble, exchanging brief glances of pain and bewilderment. But it wasn't just fear that I saw in their eyes, it was an unruly spirit. I walked as if in a trance, hearing only the crunch of my feet and my own breathing, heavy and ragged. The dust had fallen away from my face, leaving a thin layer of dirt on my skin. The steep sides of the streets where children had once played were now littered with rubble and fallen poles. Night was falling. The sky, covered with low clouds, was shrinking over the city, blocking out the last glimpses of the setting sun. The darkness slid away slowly, like a thick blanket of ink, and the first shadows began to appear in the darkness. But it wasn't just the shadows of ruins and people. They were the ghosts of the past, silent, gliding, barely perceptible. They seemed to wake up, absorbing fear and despair, ready to drown out any light. Suddenly I felt a chill run down my spine, and my heart began to beat faster. I stopped. Everything went quiet. In that absolute silence, I heard a thin, barely audible voice, not a sound, but a vibration in my soul. It sounded not from the outside, but from the inside, penetrating to the very depths of consciousness. The voice was both soft and firm, like the voice of someone who knows the secrets of the universe and isn't afraid of them. "Watch the shadows," he said. "They're not always enemies." At that moment, images flashed before my eyes, people scattered in different corners of the ruined city, each with their own fears, pain, and doubts. They seemed to be playing roles in an ancient drama in which the shadows of the past and present intertwine in an indissoluble pattern. "Shadows of the past, which you must understand in order to move on," the voice said. "But there are shadows that feed on fear and lies. They want to extinguish the light you carry inside you." I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination bubbling up inside me. I remembered Jesus telling me that fear is just a shadow that can be dispelled by light. Now I saw that it wasn't just words, it was a challenge and a promise at the same time. "The future is not written," the voice continued, "it is born in your every choice, in your every day. Whoever chooses the light will be the beginning of a new story." I raised my head and looked up at the sky. It was almost completely covered by heavy clouds, but dim stars shone between them. These fireflies looked like small beacons of hope in the dark. The first streetlights came on, casting long shadows across the ruins. I knew there would be a lot of pain and trials ahead of me, but there was a fire burning in my heart, quiet but persistent. As I walked on, I met a few people. Their faces were tired, but there was an unruly fire in their eyes. We didn't speak, the words seemed empty at that moment. We simply walked together on the road that earth and fate had laid before us. That night, I learned one important thing: fear is just the beginning of a journey, a shadow that you have to pass through to see the light. The night after the earthquake was thick and humid, as if the air itself was soaked with bitterness and tears. I was sitting in the ruins of an old theater that had once been filled with laughter and music, but now it was deathly quiet, broken only by the distant echo of sirens and the soft cry of the wind. The rubble around them was cold, sharp, as if it held a memory of pain that no one could forget. I closed my eyes and felt a weight build up in my chest, not physically, but mentally, and it held me down and wouldn't let go. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, I heard, not in words, but in feeling, a song. It wasn't a melody I knew from the world of the living, but something much deeper, a song of broken hearts, the voice of all those who had lost their home, their faith, and their hope. It filled the space around me, enveloped me, permeated me to the very depths of my soul. It was filled with pain, love, fear, and a desire to live. I opened my eyes and saw a girl standing at the edge of the ruins, no more than 20 years old, with eyes the color of dark amber, full of sadness and light at the same time. She was looking straight at me, as if she could see right through my soul. Without a word, she held out her hand, inviting me to follow her. We walked through the broken streets, each step echoing in my soul. The girl spoke without words. Her eyes and movements said that before us not just ruins, but the beginning of a path to healing and rebirth. "You must understand," she seemed to whisper, "that destruction is not the end, but the door. It is important not to be afraid to enter and accept what is inside." I remembered the words I'd heard in the ever after: fear is a shadow that can be dispelled by light. And this girl was a light in my darkness. We came to a broken-down house where an old family album lay on the floor, its pages torn and smeared with dust. I picked it up carefully and saw the photos, smiling faces, holidays, simple joys that now seemed as far away as another world. At that moment, I realized that this is not just the history of one city, it is the history of each of us. A story of pain and loss, but also of hope for healing. The voice in my head rang out again, clearer and stronger now. Don't be afraid to look deep. There, hidden in the shadows, is a light waiting in the wings. I felt something change inside me, fear beginning to give way to determination. The night was fading away, giving way to dawn, and the first rays of the sun painted the ruined city in golden tones, a promise of a new beginning. I looked at the girl, and she smiled, and her eyes shone with warmth. It was a sign. A sign that even in the midst of destruction, life is born. Dawn painted the ruins of the city in soft shades of pink and gold, as if nature itself was trying to erase the traces of a nightmare. I stood on top of the rubble, watching the first rays of the sun break through the dusty air and touch the crumpled buildings. There was a strange stillness around them, as if there was a respite after a storm, a moment of silence before the next storm. But in this calmness I felt not indifference, but the promise of change. I descended into the streets littered with rocks and rubble. Every step echoed heavily, and with every sound I could feel the earth breathing under my feet, a living thing that had experienced something terrible and was still suffering. In the distance, I saw the amber-eyed girl walking ahead of me, her step light and confident, as if she knew every crack in the old asphalt. Her face shone with calm, but there was something else in her gaze, a deep determination and unwavering faith. We stopped at the remains of an old park, where a few trees stubbornly pushed through the concrete and ash. The wind whipped their leaves effortlessly, as if to remind them that life will always find a way. "Can you feel it?" the girl asked, looking at me. I nodded, feeling something invisible but palpable in the air, something that binds destruction and rebirth together. She told me that there will be many challenges ahead, not only for the body, but also for the soul. That many people will experience fear and loss, but it is in these moments that true strength is born. "You will meet those who will not give up," she said, "and those who choose the dark. But remember, the lights don't go out as long as there is at least one who believes." I remembered the words of Jesus, which now rang like a mantra in my heart: there is a spark of divine light in each of us. Don't let it go out. It was a light that seemed to light up not just inside me, but all around me, in every look, every gesture, every smile, despite all the destruction. The park was slowly coming to life. The birds, as if undeterred, began their song. And there was a challenge in that sound, a challenge to darkness and fear and destruction. I realized that my journey was just beginning. What lies ahead is the unknown, but also the chance to be a part of something bigger than myself. Light in ashes is not a metaphor. This is a reality that I must accept and carry on. The day began bleakly, and the sky was covered with heavy gray clouds, as if the sky itself reflected all the hardships that the city and I were going through. The wind barely rustled through the half-thawed leaves, and the streets were empty, many still hesitating to leave their hiding places. I walked through the now familiar streets, trying to piece together the pieces of broken reality. Suddenly, a figure at the foot of the ruined building caught my attention, a tall man in a long light cloak, with eyes that radiated incredible peace and profound wisdom. His face was both familiar and alien, as if he came from another world, but also from the very heart of my fear and hope. I felt my heart stop beating, my breathing slow. This man, it was him. Jesus Christ. His gaze was penetrating and gentle, but there was a power hidden in it that couldn't be described. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me with such love and understanding that all my fears and doubts seemed to recede. "You were looking for answers," he finally said, his voice as deep and calm as an ancient river. "Now it's time to hear the truth that few people can bear." I nodded, unable to speak, feeling every word he said shoot right through me. "Until 2030, he continued, the world will face a storm like never before. Environmental disasters, social upheavals, conflicts, and fear are just the beginning. But these trials are not the end, but an opportunity. An opportunity to change the path of humanity if people can see the light in their hearts and remember who they really are. I listened, feeling each word leave a deep impression that was both frightening and evocative. Jesus spoke not only of external calamities, but also of the inner struggle of every human being, the struggle between fear and love, between falsehood and truth. Symbols, he pointed to the sky, where light was barely visible through the clouds, will appear in different places, reminding people that hope is alive. But not everyone will be able to see these signs, because the eyes of many are closed by fear and ignorance. I felt a responsibility that fell on my shoulders, not just as a witness, but as a guardian of this message. But along with this came relief. I am not alone, and there are those who are already ready to go this difficult way. Truth is not what you hear, but what you live, he concluded. Remember this, and the light will be with you, even in the darkest hours. And with that, he vanished into thin air, leaving me alone with a new power and a new knowledge that I had to carry on. Evening was falling over the city, filling the streets with long shadows and cold. I walked through the ruined neighborhoods, feeling every crack under my feet remind me of the fragility of everything that once seemed eternal. The air was thick with the smell of dust and burning, a reminder that the past doesn't just disappear. My thoughts swirled around the words of Jesus. His message was not just a warning, but a challenge to all of humanity. But what does it mean to go forward when there is only the abyss ahead? How to keep the light on when everything is dark? As I passed the wreckage, I noticed a group of people sitting around a campfire. Their faces were tired, but their eyes were bright and hopeful. I joined them, and we watched in silence as the flames crackled and danced as if playing with shadows. One of them, an elderly man with a white beard and deep wrinkles, spoke up. "We are all walking on the edge of a precipice. Every day is a struggle between fear and faith. And only those who choose faith will be able to see the light at the other end." I remembered how Jesus said that the future is not predetermined, that it is born out of our decisions. And these people, sitting in the dark, chose the light in spite of everything. But there was a shadow of doubt inside me. How to convince others? How can you tell them the truth when the world seems blind and deaf to warnings? The silence of the night answered me with its depth, that the path will not be easy, but it will be true. And it is this truth that is my anchor in the raging sea. With the wind blowing ash far over the horizon, I took a step forward. Not to the abyss, but to the light that begins to break through even in the thickest darkness. The world as I knew it stood on the edge of an abyss. Destruction and fear were woven tightly into the fabric of everyday life, like dark shadows stealing the light. But it was on this night that I realized that the deepest darkness always heralds the dawn. I stood at the top of a hill outside the city, where I could see a vast landscape still sick and crippled, but still alive. The sky slowly began to lighten, the first rays of the sun breaking through the remnants of the storm clouds, drawing thin, fragile threads of light on the horizon. I remembered the words of Jesus, "Truth is not what you hear, but what you live." I realized that every action I took was now a message, a light that could ignite a spark in others. I was surrounded by those who chose to go with the light, people of different destinies, ages, and histories. We were silent, listening to the first birdsong and the whisper of the wind, and there was power in that silence, the power of acceptance, the power of a new beginning. The road ahead will be long and difficult. There are still many shadows in the world, and many eyes are still closed with fear. But if even one person dares to open their heart and go towards the light, the darkness will not be able to win. I closed my eyes and felt the warm wind brush against my face, a reminder that even after the longest night, there is always dawn. And with that hope, I took the first step into a new day, ready to carry the light on, into this world that so desperately needs a miracle.